A great afternoon to all of you. I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our Prelims Masterclass 2025. And if you are watching for the first time, I would like to introduce myself. This is Sureka Bhaskar, actually presenting to you the top most or the 100 most important articles or the current affair topics for on environment and ecology for the upcoming Prelims examination 2025. If you are watching, as I said, for the first time, we had already completed 5 classes where we have completed significant portions or the important high impacted or high marked areas of current affairs on environment and ecology, like ecosystem, the environment bodies, the organizations, climate change, the mitigation efforts, the methods which are used for mitigation and adaptation. And also we actually discussed with respect to that of India's take away from the UNFCCC Conference of Parties, India's measures, etc. And after which we also dealt with the biodiversity topics. Okay, so this is actually the 6th class of environment and ecology under your Prelims Masterclass 2025. Okay, so let us actually move forward after looking at the topics that we had already discussed, and also we will be discussing on what are the topics that we'll be discussing in today's class. So let us get started. Okay. So let me see how many people have actually joined our session, and then let's get going. Okay. So this is actually the ritual, that is, after discussing this slide only, we always move towards our next slide or the next discussion or the topic. Okay. So this is just to remind you and give you the sense of completion of how many important topics we've already covered for the current affairs. Okay. In the current affairs for your examination. So first of all, we actually started with the ecosystems, right? So I'm just not going into the detail of each and every topic, but I will just give an overview of what we've already completed in case you're the first timer watching this video. Okay, so we actually started with the forest ecosystem, and we dealt with different initiatives like the Peace Forest Initiative, the Red Initiative, as well as what's the role of UNFCCC, as well as the other Rio conventions like UNCBD, UNCCD, etc. Okay. Then we moved on to discuss about the ocean ecosystem. Okay, the ocean ecosystem, very, very important. We also discussed about what is the need for India in order to sign as well as ratify the High Seas Treaty, and what are the beaches that have actually gotten the blue flag certification from Foundation of Environmental Education. All that we've actually discussed under ocean ecosystem. Then we moved forward to discuss the other types of ecosystem. So what are the other types of ecosystem? Here we discussed about the wetland ecosystem and the associated conservation under the Ramsar Convention, right? And then we discussed about the mangrove ecosystem and how it is actually used for. It's also called as a blue ecosystem or the blue carbon storage ecosystem, right? Because of its potential to sequester high amounts of carbon or carbon dioxide, you can say, through the process of photosynthesis, because its waterlogged soil actually has an anaerobic or the anoxic condition where it makes it, a potential absorber or the storage component of storing the carbon dioxide or sequestering carbon for over millions of years. Okay, so this is what we looked at. And then we also looked at the mountain ecosystem through the mountain partnership that we actually discussed. Also, we discussed on the ecosystem of coral reefs, the different kinds of coral reefs like the fringing reefs, the atolls, the barrier reef, etc. And then we moved on to look at the concept of the deep sea corals and how these are different from that of the shallow water corals. And also we discussed on the concept of artificial corals. Okay, so these are the different topics that we dealt with under ecosystem. Now moving forward, we looked at the environmental organization and bodies which are responsible for monitoring the weather or the climatic conditions in India. Like for example, we have the Indian Meteorological Department. Okay. Next one, we discussed about the National Green Tribunal, its jurisdiction and how it mandates the environmental impact assessment, whether it has the power of the civil or the the criminal authority, or like the court and all those things, the composition of the entity we actually discussed. Okay, moving forward, we also discussed about what? We discussed about the Central Groundwater Board and the annual report that it actually released with respect to that of the contaminants that results in the diseases as well as water contamination, because it was also in the recent PYQs, that is the previous mains examination question was asked on the groundwater contamination in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Okay, so we discussed about this as well. And then moving forward, we discussed about the international bodies like the Global Environment Facility, how it actually acts as a funding mechanism or a pool of funds for different other environmental conventions like the Minamata Conventions on Mercury. You actually have the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, the UNFCCC, the UNCBD, UNCCD, all these things we actually discussed over here. And then we also discussed the wildlife fund for nature and what is the recent controversy with respect to WWF with when it actually comes to the trading of the polar bear fur. Okay, so we actually discussed about WWF as well. Then we moved on to the third most important topic, that is climate change. This is important for both your prelims and the mains examination. And if you see for the prelims examination, the important takeaway from this is the what to say, the impact or what is the stance that India actually took in the recent COP, that is Conference of Parties meeting 29, that actually took place at Baku. Okay, so here we discussed about the UNFCCC COP 29. We also discussed about the COP 16 of UNCCD, that is United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Okay, so apart from this, we also spoke about the Green Climate Fund and also spoke about the Green Energy Program, okay, Green Credit Program that we also spoke, and also spoke about the mechanism of carbon markets and how it involves the trade in carbon credits, then the different measures, that is mitigation as well as adaptation methods like the CCUS as well as the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism of the European Union, as well as the nature restoration plan of the EU, that is the European Union. All that we discussed under climate change. Moving towards India's contributions or measures in order to curb climate change, we looked at the CCPA's guidelines on greenwashing. We saw what are the deceptive practices or the falsification, or what you say, the false claim that these industries or the emitting industries or any kind of corporates actually make with respect to the services, the output or the product, saying that they are environmentally sustainable when they are otherwise not. So this was the concept of greenwashing. In order to actually protect the consumers, the CCPA, that is the Central Consumer Protection Authority, had come up with these greenwashing guidelines. We saw these guidelines in detail as well. Next, moving forward, we discussed about the Ecomark rules of 2024 by the Ministry of Environment and Forest Change that actually was brought about. And also, we looked at the coastal regulation zone. We saw the recent relaxation that has been made by the CRZ notification of 2019, where they actually had given a flexibility to the coastal areas in order to carry out the infrastructure development projects. Okay, earlier it was a no development zone, that is the zones are actually classified as CRZ 1, 2 and 3 depending upon the sensitivity or the ecological importance. Okay, so CRZ 3 are the densely populated rural area. So over here the notification actually had said that you can take up your developmental activities in this region. Earlier they restricted it to around 200 meters and now it has been reduced to around 50 meters. So this is what is the notification we actually saw. So after completing the topic of climate change, we jumped into another important topic, that is biodiversity. So here we looked at three important concepts. One is what is the concept of tiger reserves and how far India has fared with respect to the conservation of these big cats. Okay, and moving forward, we spoke about the recently added tiger reserve, that is the Guru Ghasidas in Chhattisgarh, and we also looked at the map which involved different tiger reserves from different parts of the country. Okay, now moving forward, we looked into the concept of biosphere reserves by UNESCO. And finally, we saw what is the concept of the eco-sensitive areas, which actually act as the buffer region for these particular protected areas like the wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, etc., from the direct influence or the impact of human beings. Okay, so this is what we saw. And moving forward, with respect to biodiversity, in yesterday's class, let me take the space over here. In yesterday's class, we saw different conservation programs. Okay, when any topic comes, whether you actually have a convention or you have the recent meeting that is held or not, is what is very, very important for the examination. Okay, so with respect to biodiversity conservation, there was this COP16 that was held with United Nations Convention on biological diversity, that is UNCBD, that was held. Okay, so here we saw what were the updated biodiversity action plan, that is the national biodiversity action plans that India has updated. So here we also discussed about the Kunming Montreal Protocol as well as its 30-30 targets. Okay, so what are the targets it actually aims to achieve with respect to protection of biodiversity? There we saw about the pesticides, it has to be reduced. We discussed about the invasive alien species that have to be halved, as well as any kind of subsidies that any particular nation gives for any activity like agriculture or fisheries, as well as the what to say, the industries. What happens, it has to be reduced, that's what it actually said. And also pooling of around $200 billion from all the private as well as the government, that is the public sectors, in order to what to say, fund the initiatives of biodiversity conservation. So this is what we discussed in this Kunming protocol as well. Then we discussed few other concepts like the International Big Cat Alliance. Okay, so this is actually an initiative, that is a global initiative that has been opened up by India in 2023 in order to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Project Tiger that actually started in the year 1973 in Jim Corbett National Park. So this is one. Next one, we spoke about the Tiger Conservation Coalition, where we actually saw 8 to 9 NGOs, including the IUCN, the WWF, and the traffic. They actually came together in order to conserve the tiger population across the world. And then we moved on to understand the concept of CITES, that is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna. We saw the different appendix, that is the conservation level, the appendix 1, appendix 2 as well as 3, which conserves 3%, 97% and 1% of the total 36,000 species under CITES. Also, we saw what are all the national frameworks under which the animals and or the plants, that is the species, are protected, like the Wildlife Protection Act as well as the Customs Act and the EXIM, that is the Export Import Protection Act. All that we actually discussed over here. And the last topic we discussed was the integrated development of the wildlife habitat. Okay, so integrated development, where we actually discussed that this is actually a centrally sponsored scheme that came up in the year 2008 by the government. Okay, so it depends on the devolution of funds on the finance commission, of course. And then we discussed about what are the different projects like Project Tiger, Project Elephant as well as Project Dolphin over here. Okay, then we jumped on to the next most important topic. So this is actually the next topic we started, that is the concept of pollution. Okay, so we discussed three different types. I told you there are three major types of pollution, that is the air pollution, the water pollution as well as the soil pollution. So this is where we are, and today we will actually start or resume or continue with this particular pollution. Okay, so let's move forward and see this particular screen. Okay, so there are three major types of pollution. One is what? Air pollution. Next is water pollution, and the other one is actually your other kinds of pollution. This is water pollution majorly. So here itself, let me actually tell you, we saw that under air pollution also we discussed three important topics. Okay, so under air pollution there were three important topics. One was the air of Anthropocene initiative. Okay, so where it was a culmination of the science as well as art in order to depict the quantum or the amount of the pollution that is actually existing or different countries actually have. So air of the Anthropocene initiative. The second one was the National Clean Air Program, and we also discussed about the NAAQ, that is the National Air Ambient Air Quality. Okay, and then you actually we discussed about another concept, that is what I'm not able to recall. The one is air of the Anthropocene, next is NCAP, and the final concept, yes, it was the ground level ozone, or it is also called as the tropospheric ozone. Okay, So this is what we actually discussed over here. Now let's move forward and continue. We finished air pollution, okay? Now we will move forward with our very next topic, and this topic is very important, and this is nothing but your water pollution. Let me write it here. It is your water pollution. Okay, so water pollution. So over here, what are the topics that we are going to discuss? Okay, let me take you through. So recently there was this water protection, let me erase it later, protection and control of pollution bill. Okay, this pollution bill was recently passed in the year 2024, and it was passed by the parliament. Okay, so is it visible? Can anybody answer? Yes, it's visible, right? Okay. So this water bill was actually passed in 2024, and this seeks to replace the Water Act of 1974. So here we'll be discussing about this Water Act or the Water Bill, and what are the amendments it actually seeks to bring with respect to that of the stringent punishment or the penalties, and what is the power that is actually, or the overriding power it gives the Central Pollution Control Board, and what is the power of the central government. We know water is a state subject, right? So in what way is it actually breaching the principle of federalism? All that we will be discussing over here. Now the second topic that we will be discussing is the UN Water Convention. So what is this UN Water Convention? So when did it come into existence? Okay, so it actually involved only the economic commission of the European region earlier, and from 2016 onwards it was actually open to all other UN members also. So UN Water Convention is what we will discuss. Then we will discuss how can water save the greenhouse gases treated under UNCLOS. So United Nations Convention on Laws of Seas. Okay, so how are these greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, etc., are they considered as pollutants under UNCLOS or not, and how does it matter, is what we will discuss over here. The next topic that we will be discussing will be the arsenic contamination. Okay, so next topic will be your arsenic contamination. Arsenic contamination. So this will be the next topic, and finally we will be looking at an initiative that is nothing but your Jal Sanchay initiative. Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari. Okay, so this is an initiative which has been inspired from the successful Jal Sanchay scheme of Gujarat, where they actually involved the community participation. That is, the local communities and the citizens can actually involve in bringing up water conservation. That is why under Jal Sanchay and Jal Bhagidari, they actually want to establish, a number of water or rainwater harvesting structures. Okay, so under this, what happens is that water is not only treated as a resource, but it is actually treated in a holy form. That is, it is in the form of God, as well as rivers are actually treated as goddesses. Okay. Then under this initiative, that water conservation is not only seen as a policy matter, but it is actually seen as a social commitment. So all these dimensions we'll be discussing in this particular article. Okay, so here we are actually done with the topic of water conservation, water pollution as well as its conservation. Next, moving forward is our next topic. I hope yellow is visible. Yes, it's better. So here we will be discussing about the salt affected soil. So this is soil pollution, right? Soil pollution. So after finishing water pollution, we will be discussing soil pollution, where we will be discussing the first topic, that is the salt affected soils and what is the impact it is actually going to have on the vegetation. Okay, so this is what it is, the salt affected soils. And the next topic, that is the second topic, will be what? It is on soil acidification. So what do you mean by acidification? This is what we will be discussing over here. That is excessive release of what? Your hydrogen ions. Okay, so when this actually ionizes, what is the acidification? The pH level of the soil will actually go below 7. That is why it is called as the acidic soil. What are the methods in order to restore back the nature of the soil or restore back the pH levels? This is what we'll be discussing in soil pollution. Okay, now we will move forward to the other types of pollution. So other kinds or other types of pollution, where the first one we will be discussing about is light pollution. Okay, first is light pollution. So what do the various reports actually say with respect to light pollution? What are the different types of light pollution? What are the initiatives globally and nationally that India has actually taken? All that we'll be discussing under light pollution. Okay, next we will be talking about the global nitrous oxide N2O budget 2024 that has actually been released, and we will see what is the overall concentration of nitrous oxide which is present that leads to the pollution levels. Okay, so this is the second topic. Next one we will talk about the methane contamination. Okay, so CH4 contamination or methane pollution. So this is what we will be looking at, and moving forward we will be talking about the nitrogen pollution. Okay, so what do you mean by nitrogen pollution, and what are the different pollutions, like not only the soil pollution, the water as well as the air pollution? What is the contribution of nitrogen to the pollution? That is, in humans it actually causes a condition called as methemoglobinemia, where the hemoglobin of your RBCs won't be able to sufficiently carry the oxygen. So this is what is called as methemoglobinemia, and in infants it is called as the blue baby syndrome. Okay, so this is what is the nitrogen pollution. Moving forward we will also discuss about mercury pollution. Let me write it here. We will discuss about the mercury pollution, and finally we will talk about the pollution by the persistent organic pollutants as well as the PFAS, which are called as the perfluoro or the polyalkyl substances. Okay, perfluoro or the polyfluoroalkyl substances. So this is the PFAS. So these are all the different topics that we will be discussing today. Okay, so I hope you got a hang of it. Now we will start with the very first topic of today's discussion, that is your water pollution. Looks too uncomfortable, isn't it? Yes. So this is the plight of water in India. Specifically, if you see after these big yatras, right now we are planning for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. We also actually we had the Mahakumbh that actually happened. So do you know what is the rate of water pollution that is the anthropogenic activities actually cause? Yes, it is actually immense. Okay. So that is why I had actually brought this up to show you what reality we are undergoing. Okay, so this is what it is. So here it also gives us an insight on how careful and responsible we should be. Okay, so even when we go on a boating, if we actually go on a sightseeing, however educated we are, what do? We cause a lot of litter, right? So all that should be curtailed or curbed is what is our takeaway from this topic. Okay, so now let's move forward. That is the first topic of the day is the water pollution. So under water pollution, the first topic is the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Bill 2024 that has been passed by the Parliament, which seeks to replace the Act of 1974. Okay, so this is actually our first topic. Now, moving forward, let us actually see what has been the different provisions or what was the mandate of this particular Water Protection and Control of Pollution Bill of Act of 1974. So as soon as India actually got independence, this was one of the first piece of legislations which actually acknowledged the fact that water, or the regulation of water has to there has to be an institutional structure, or there has to be an institutional structure in order to protect and regulate water as well as the disputes surrounding it. Okay, how you share it, how you have to protect it, what is the extent of pollution that is actually happening in the water. So this is the first piece of legislation that actually came. So it recognized the importance of an authority, right? It recognized the establishment of institutional structures. That is why it came up with the Central Pollution Control Board as well as the State Pollution Control Boards. And also it gave authority to these central and state control boards. I mean, it actually gave them the comprehensive powers. What all it can do? It can actually advise, okay? It can also coordinate, and it can provide technical support and assistance for the prevention and control of water pollution. And it also empowered the State Pollution Control Board, stating that you will have to mandatorily give you have to mandatorily give permission or consent for establishing any kind of a treatment plant, okay? And which will also be discharging the sewage or their effluents into the water. So before establishing such an treatment plant, the whoever is the person who's going to establish it actually have to have your consent mandatorily, is what this particular act actually said. Moving forward, we will see what are the prohibitions under that this particular 1974 act actually laid, okay? So you cannot dispose any kind of poisonous, noxious, that is also poisonous only, or any kind of poisonous or the polluting effluents or matter into the water. However, if you are actually dumping any material into a stream for the purpose of reclamation, that is, you are trying to revive back the purity of the water, then you can actually do it, okay? So this can be a prelim statement. So was dumping any substances for the reclamation of the water or reclamation of the land, is this actually considered an offense under this particular Water Act of 1974? You need to know that no, this is actually not it is not condemned under the act, and it is allowed, okay, for the reclamation of land. Next one, it actually gave stringent punishments or penalties, okay? So it also imposed penalties like fines as well as imprisonment also for polluting the water resources and for violating the act, okay? Now there came this recent amendment. Earlier what happened, there were many reasons for this amendment to actually come, because first one, 1974 act, okay, so it is almost 50 years old. So what they thought that it should not be obsolete, so we have to actually keep going to the current requirements of our society or the ecosystem, okay? So that is why, that is one of the rationale of bringing about this amendment. The second one is that there were a lot of stringent punishments that were given, like right, that was imprisonments as well as fines as well. So they actually said no, let us make the citizens actually follow these by principles but with not by fear, okay? So they actually have to voluntarily come forward in taking up this and not just by fear. So that is also another rationale, okay? So let's see whom all does this act actually apply to. So first, initially this particular amendment will apply to the areas of Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, as well as all the other union territories, and all the other states who want to take this up can actually extend its applicability to their states by passing resolutions, okay? Next one, the consent exemptions for establishing the industries. Earlier, what did the Act of 1974 say? Mandatorily, the state, that is the State Pollution Control Board, actually have to give the consent in case they are setting up a treatment plant. But this actually provides certain overriding powers to the center. So this has always been the problem in India, right? Somehow or the other, we actually want to give, that is, we slightly incline towards the center, okay, that is the union. However, the water is a state subject. Okay, so the amendment actually says that there can be overriding powers of the center, okay, when the central government, in case if it actually wants, it can consult the Central Pollution Control Board and exempt few industries, okay, from getting such consent of the State Pollution Control Board. So center has an overriding authority above the State Pollution Control Board, was the first thing. The next one is the central government can actually issue guidelines, okay, for granting, for refusing, or cancellation of the consent. So already the state government or the State Pollution Control Board has given a consent, but the central government can also issue guidelines on whether granting it or refusing it or cancelling the grant that has already been given by the state. Next one, the bill retail. So what do they say is these two are the exemptions, or you can say the overriding powers that this particular bill actually gave the already existing act. But it actually says the old provision, that is non-receival of consent, will invite punishment. Okay, but you cannot consent only when the central government wants an industry to be exempted, it can. But if you want to establish an industrial or a treatment plant over there, you have to mandatorily actually get what, the permission of the pollution control board. Otherwise you will, state pollution control board, otherwise you will actually receive an imprisonment, that is penalty of imprisonment up to 6 years as well as fine. Okay, now it penalizes, the new bill penalizes any kind of tampering that you do of the monitoring devices. What are these monitoring devices? This actually determines whether the industry or a particular treatment plant can come up in such an area or vicinity. If you actually what to say, do anything that is malicious over here, then that will actually get you a penalizing this one, that is you will have to pay a fine of rupees 10,000 to around 15 lakh. Next, removal of imprisonment. This is one of the pros as well as cons of this particular amendment. Okay, why? Because imprisonment was actually considered to be a very big penalty, right? But if you actually remove that, then what happens? More industries will actually start establishing such treatment plants, more effluents will be released. Okay, so there will be more pollution. So this is also one of the disadvantages. Okay, so it has actually given stringent fines, but it has removed this provision of imprisonment. Next one, the chairman of state board. So the chairman of the state pollution control board is nominated by the state government. Okay, but the bill actually adds. Okay, so usually the chairman is by the state government only, but this bill actually says center will make the guidelines. Okay, so center will prescribe the manner in which the nomination and the term of this chairman actually will be there. So what is the conditions of service, when he can be appointed, how much tenure, all that the center shall decide is what the bill actually says. Okay, now let us see the Water Amendment Act of 2024. What was the rationale and what can be the criticisms for this particular act? Okay, so now if you can see here, I hope this is visible. Yeah. So it says that trust deficit. Okay. In order to address the trust deficit between the industry and the government, because the government was imposing heavy fines and penalties. So in order to bridge that gap, they had actually come up with this particular act. Okay. Next one, strengthening the law instead of creating the fear. Next one is criticism. There is too much centralization of the powers. Okay. That is what the manner in which the State Pollution Control Board chairman will be nominated, will be decided by the center. They will decide if any industry can actually be exempted from getting the, what to say, they can be exempted from getting the permission for establishing the treatment plant over there. All that also they had actually said. Okay, next one. So this is actually going to cause what? The strain in the spirit of federalism. Next one, laxity in the compliance. That is, this may lead to more violations by leading to more pollution. Okay, so this is what is the rationale as well as the criticism behind this particular act. Okay, so do you understand this particular topic? Any doubts that you guys have, you can actually ask me in the comment section. Let's actually keep this very interactive. Okay, so okay, so let's move towards the next topic, that is the UN Water Convention. So this UN Water Convention recently was actually held in order to deal with, or how to deal with the future issues of the transboundary water cooperation. So transboundary water cooperation immediately reminds me of the recent halting or the stalling of the Indus Water Treaty, where India will no more share the waters of this different tributaries of river Indus with Pakistan. So this was what was recently decided, that is yesterday. In the background, that is with respect to the recent terrorist attack that actually took place in Falgam, Jammu and Kashmir. What an unfortunate event. Seriously, it just breaks our hearts, right? Yeah. So this UN convention actually deals with the transboundary water cooperation. So from here itself, how you can remember whether India has actually ratified this or not? No, India has not, because this actually talks about peaceful, sharing of the transboundary rivers with the state, and gives further, other provisions also. In case if India becomes a part of it, then how it will deal with the water sharing with that of Pakistan has always been in its mind. Okay, so we will actually see this. Okay, now let us first see about the UN Water Convention. This is also called as the Convention on Protection of the Transboundary Water Courses and International Lakes. How they are used and how they are protected is what it deals with. Okay, so it initially originated in the year 1992 and it is under UNECE. Okay, so what is UNECE? This is the United Nations Economic Commission to Europe. Commission to Europe. Okay. So this was under UNECE. Do you understand? And here it talks about the cooperation and the management of the transboundary water courses. Okay, and how the lakes actually have to be used. Okay, so this is what very important. Okay, so the goal is there has to be equitable sharing of the resources. There has to be sustainable sharing of the water resources. At the same time, apart from sharing, you must also focus on pollution, protecting the ecosystem, and in case of any dispute that actually arises, what can be the mechanism for dispute resolution? All that is been spoken about over here. And this UN convention operates under this particular commission to Europe, which is actually headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay, now let us actually move forward and see this in detail. Okay, so let me zoom it for you guys. See, the UN Water Convention. This mainly focuses on PRC or CPR, you can actually say. First is prevent, reduce and control. Okay, so what you reduce and then protect and control, prevent and control, it is the transboundary impact and the way in which the transboundary water sources as well as the lakes are actually being used. It has to be done in an equitable way and it also has to be complying with the principles of sustainable management. Okay, this is what it is. So the parties bordering the same transboundary waters have to cooperate. Okay, because they have to come with that of a bilateral agreement between both of them, and they have to establish joint bodies. So parties must actually come together and they should sort it out. Okay, so the water convention does not replace the bilateral and multilateral agreements, but it fosters them. For example, if there is Indus Water Treaty, this particular UN convention actually does not replace it, but it makes sure that all the principles as per the Indus Water Treaty is actually followed or not, whether this particular amount of water is shared between both the sides or not. If one person stalls it, then there will be call for dispute resolution mechanism as per this convention. Okay, so this is what it is. Now, this convention was initially adopted in the year 1992. Okay, and then it actually entered into force 4 years later, that is in 1996. Okay, and then what happened in 2003, the water convention was actually amended. Okay, this actually allowed the accession of the countries outside this particular UNECE region also. Till then, it actually pertained only to the countries which were in this particular European Commission region. Okay, do you understand? European region. And by 2016, if you see, all the United Nations member states can actually be a part of this UN Water Convention, and it focuses on the implementation of integrated water resource management. Very easy. Okay, so these are all common sense. See, UPSC never gives exact questions that are actually mentioned over here. Certain questions have to be answered through our common sense. These are certain static topics, like for example UNECE, when it was established, these can be static, but what are the objectives is something that you can actually deduce through your application of mind, right? So it also measures the ecologically sound management and protection of transboundary surface waters, and also enables and fosters the cooperation further. So this is what is about your UN Water Convention. Now, as I told you, it was initially adopted by the UNECE country, that is the Economic Commission to the Europe. Then in 2016, it was actually opened for all the members. So non-UNECE countries can also become parties, and currently if you see, there are 40 parties to this particular convention. India, not a current member, very, very important, okay, because it is actually scared whether there will be any concerns with respect to that of their applicability to the bilateral laws that India actually has with different countries and the principles of sovereignty, okay. So this is what is the UN Water Convention. Now, of course, key provisions we already discussed from that infographic, right? There has to be reasonable use of water. So how do you actually say if there is reasonable use of water? It depends on various factors, okay? It depends upon the size of the population and what are all the the geographical conditions which is actually persistent over there, whether it is the higher or the lower riparian state, okay? So all that it actually considers, and also the economic need of that particular country with respect to that of water. Second one, there has to be environmental protection, okay. So there has to be a mandate, or you can say the countries have to oblige, okay, in order to prevent, control and reduce the pollution in the transboundary waters. And of course there has to be cooperation, okay, in dealing with the what to say, whether it is negotiations or dealing with any kind of disputes, as well as conflict resolution, all that has to be there. And finally, the dispute resolution mechanisms are also provided by this particular convention. So these are the key provisions of the convention. Now moving forward, the third article, okay. So the GHG is under UNCLOS marine pollution. Very, very important, very, very easy also, okay. So there is this organization, that is International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. This was established under UNCLOS, United Nations Convention, that is what? United Nations Convention on the Laws of Seas. So this particular, under this what happened, there was a tribunal that was established, that was called as the International Tribunal for the Laws of Seas, and this actually recently declared that the GHGs actually contribute to the marine pollution. So they are also considered to be the marine pollutants. So this is what this particular that is the tribunal, ITLOS, I can say ITLOS, had recently come up with, okay. So now let us quickly see about UNCLOS. So it is also called as the laws of seas, we know that, right? It is also called as the laws of seas. Okay, so it is also called as the laws of seas, as I told you, and it actually brings down a comprehensive regime, okay, or what you say, what is the kind of law and order that the entire world actually has to abide by when it comes to oceans and seas, okay. So this is what is called as UNCLOS. So when was it adopted? Of course, it was adopted in 1982 and came up after 12 years, that is 1994. And immediately in 1995, if you see, India had actually ratified the UN clause, okay. Now, if you see about this particular tribunal, that is the International Tribunal on the Laws of Seas, it is an independent judicial body, of course, that was established under the UNCLOS. So, what are the jurisdictions it actually has? So, if there is any kind of what to say, dispute with respect to interpretation of or the application of the convention. For example, if a country which is actually part of the UNCLOS or ratified, for example, say India, if it is actually having any problems with respect to the EEZ, that is the exclusive economic zone, or the territorial water or internal water, or the contiguous zone or the national airspace, if it actually has any problem with that, then it can actually go to this particular ITLOS, okay. And the UNCLOS actually divides the marine area into 5 main zones that we had already discussed, okay. One is the internal water, that is, if this is the land and this is the baseline, then whatever it's towards the land, this particular water is the internal water. What is the territorial sea? What do you mean by the contiguous zone? That is, territorial sea is from the baseline, whatever is the portion up to 12 nautical miles. This is called as the territorial waters, okay. And here what happens, the sovereignty belongs to this particular coastal state or the country only, okay. Then From here, from this 12 nautical miles, if you see to 24 nautical miles, that is again another 12 nautical miles, actually is called as the contiguous zone. And from the baseline, if you take around 200 nautical miles, that is called as your exclusive economic zone. Here we will actually see whether this particular coastal country actually has the power to make laws with respect to this one, whether there is actually an innocent passage of the foreign vessels which can be allowed in this particular zone. All that we will see. Before that, we will see the 5 main zones that are classified by the UNCLOS of the marine areas. Okay, so these are the 5 classification. So this is your land, okay. This is considered as internal water, and from here the baseline till 12 nautical miles is your territorial sea, okay. So here the state or the coastal country actually has entire sovereignty, and there is no passage or innocent passage which is provided for the foreign vessels. Next one, from here this 12 nautical miles to another 12 nautical miles, that is 24 nautical miles, what happens? This is your contiguous zone, okay. Here what happens, innocent passage of the foreign vessels is actually allowed. Next, from this particular, where is this, yeah, from this particular baseline to 200 nautical miles is your exclusive economic zone. So here we will actually see whether the mining activities as well as the sea exploration, all this is allowed or not, we will actually discuss. And beyond this is what is called as the high seas, okay. And this portion is called as the deep, where the continental shelf actually ends and the ocean floor actually begins. So this is what is called as the deep, okay. So let us see. So for this only, they have actually brought about a high seas treaty, and India is actually yet to, so this is actually a framework in how we have to deal with the high seas or the international waters, okay. So this is what India is yet to sign and ratify. So India has not signed or ratified this. Now I told you, let's quickly discuss baseline. So there is actually a high water line, so high water as well as the low tide, right? So this is actually defined as the low water line along the coast, and this is actually officially recognized by this particular coastal state, okay. Next one is the internal water. What do you mean by internal water? Whatever is the water which is actually towards the land from the baseline. So if this is the land, this is water, sorry, this is the baseline, and whatever is this portion is called as the internal water, where the coastal states actually have the sovereignty which is similar to that of the land territory. Just as how the land belongs to the state, this portion of water also belongs. This can include water, I mean rivers, it can include bays, it can also have lakes that are connected to the sea, okay. So here no innocent passage for foreign vessels is allowed. Next one is the territorial sea. So whatever from this baseline, so again baseline, whatever extends from this baseline to 12 nautical mile is called as the territorial sea. Here also this particular state can actually have complete sovereignty over the water, the seabed, the subsoil as well as the airspace entirely belongs to this particular state, and this however allows the passage for foreign vessels. But then it should not hamper with the security of the coastal areas. Usually you see, right, the fishermen between India and Sri Lanka, they actually arrest each other. That is because of this particular dispute, okay. So here is the territorial sea. Now moving forward, we will see what is the contiguous zone. So here from the baseline, you saw 12 nautical miles is a territorial. From here till 24 nautical miles is actually your what? Your contiguous zone. This allows what all? It has the coastal, it actually allows the coastal state in order to enforce laws, okay. What are the laws regarding with respect to that of customs, taxation, any kind of immigration issues, pollution, all that it can deal with, okay. So the jurisdiction is limited to the ocean surface and the floor, and this does not include airspace. Very, very important, does not include airspace. So contiguous only till territorial water you can talk about the airspace. Beyond this you cannot talk about the airspace. Next one is exclusive economic zone. I told you here again baseline, from the baseline 200 nautical miles is your exclusive economic zone. Here also the coastal states have all the rights, okay, or sovereign rights for exploring and also for exploiting, conserving and managing the natural resources which are actually present over here. It includes the rights to produce energy from water, very important, currents and the winds, and also there is freedom of navigation as well as overflight for the other states. Okay, there are very limited exemptions. Then again, if it actually affects the sovereignty or the security, then there is an issue. Next one, beyond the exclusive economic zone is what is called as your high seas, and this is also called as your international waters. Okay, and this now becomes what? A common heritage of all mankind. It is all common. Okay, so these become global common. So here a particular country or the coastal state cannot claim sovereignty over this particular portion beyond the 200 nautical miles, and here it is free for all the states to use for only peaceful purposes. This includes navigation. It also includes undersea exploration or any kind of scientific experiments you want to do, you can also do in this particular region. Okay, so these are the classifications. So now I hope you actually understood what it is. So what was important is that the tribunal was important, that is an independent body which actually deals with any kind of dispute resolution in case, or which actually deals with any of the classification that is given under UNCLOS. It actually said that the global greenhouse gases are the potential pollutants on the marine pollution of the marine ecosystem. Okay, so this is what it is. Now let us actually move forward and see arsenic contamination of groundwater. Okay, so we will look into the arsenic contamination of groundwater. So what? This is what is arsenic? Arsenic is a semi-metallic element. Okay, so we will actually see the Central Groundwater Board recently has reported that arsenic levels in the groundwater in several parts of India are higher when compared to that of the permissible limits that have been given by the Bureau of Indian Standards. See, whatever, make a table. I will give you a homework. There, discuss about what is the pollutant or the contaminant. Okay, and then what is the permissible level into 2. Divide that, the permissible level as per WHO, permissible level as per the Bureau of Indian Standards, just write both, and then the disease that is associated and which part of India has it actually affected with the map, so that it becomes very easy, and if there is any kind of initiative that has been given by the government. So this is actually very important. Okay, so this will help you score well in your prelims examination, and also you can replicate this in your mains examination for your answers or essay or whatever it is. Okay, so it has, the Central Groundwater Board has actually said that the arsenic contamination of the groundwater in several parts of India has exceeded the Bureau of Indian Standards limit, that is the national limits. Okay, what is the national limit? 0.01 milligrams per liter. So this only is the BIS standard. Okay, now let's move forward and see the key highlights of the report. So arsenic has been reported in 230 districts in 25 different states. Again, not very important, and the contamination is mainly due to the geogenic processes, which are the natural processes by the release of arsenic from the aquifers, etc., under specific conditions. Next, the major affected areas. So this is why there was a question on groundwater pollution, okay, in the Indo-Gangetic plains. So the Ganga Brahmaputra plains are the most affected due to the presence of the aquifers. Okay, so these aquifers embedded within the late quaternary deposits. So if you are a geography optional student, you know about these geological time scale, right, which has eon, era, period, epoch. Okay, so these are this, here you can see the period is what? Your quaternary period. The epoch is what? The Holocene or the Pleistocene. So this is the present one, right? So this is the period. So the aquifers have actually been embedded. Okay, so the presence of aquifers embedded in the late quaternary deposit. So this is the meaning of the word quaternary. For others, for GS students, it's not that important. But anyways, geological time scale, knowing about it is very important as well, just as a common knowledge factor. So prospects for reduction. So what is the prospect for reduction over here is that due to the geogenic origin, yeah, let us actually continue. Okay. So, due to the geogenic origin, large scale reduction of arsenic level in groundwater is not feasible because it is coming out naturally, right? So, this is what is the key highlights of this particular report. Okay. Now, let's move forward and see what is this particular arsenic. It is, of course, a semi metallic element. So, this is naturally found in the Earth's crust. Okay. It is highly toxic in its inorganic form. And what is the permissible limit? 0.01 mg, that is milligram per liter. What are the risks? So if you actually have if you are having a prolonged exposure to this particular semi-metallic element, then what happens? It actually causes arsenic poisoning, which is also called as arsenicosis. Okay, and this also leads to cancer, then cardiovascular diseases, skin diseases, etc. Okay, and also it actually disrupts your cognitive development. Okay, so this is what it is specifically in children. Next, moving forward, we will see sources of arsenic in groundwater. What are the different sources? Of course, natural sources, because of the volcanic activity that actually takes place, and in case if there is erosion of the arsenic rich rocks or the weathering phenomena, because of that arsenic gets released. Next one, the human activities. Of course, the first one will be the industrial activities, right? And also when you actually use more of fertilizers, which is actually with these inorganic compounds, then the agriculture chemicals also result in arsenic contamination of groundwater. And finally, the mining operations. The other sources are nothing but leaching from that of the landfills. You have landfills, right, where you actually dump all the waste. Okay, so arsenic from all the waste can percolate into the ground and can affect the groundwater table. Okay, so leaching from landfills and also the combustion or the burning of the fossil fuels. Okay, so these are all the sources of arsenic in groundwater. Fifth article is Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari. So Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari, often seen in news, is actually related to which of the following? Can be a possible question. So this has actually been recently released from Surat. So can you see what it aims at? In establishing, okay, or mounting the rainwater harvesting structures. Okay, many structures across Gujarat, and this has actually been inspired by the Jal Sanchay initiative of Gujarat. Okay, where it actually focuses on the rainwater harvesting structure for conservation of water, and also treats water not just as a resource but in a godly or the goddess form, where the rivers are actually considered to be goddesses. It also involves the local or the community participation. And apart from the community participation, what does it do? It actually sees this entire initiative not just as a policy matter but as a social or the societal commitment. Okay, so this is what is called as this Jal Sanchay Jan Bhagidari initiative. You can see the rainwater structures, right, where the rainwater that seeps underground is actually stored over here in a recharge well. That's it. Or any kind of overflow or flooding, it can be used in conservation of rainwater. Okay, so this is what is rainwater harvesting technique. Let us actually see. It aims to build around how many? 25,000 rainwater harvesting structures with active public involvement, right? So that is when you ensure long-term sustainability of water. Next one. inspired by the Jal Sanchay initiative, which actually engages the citizens as well as bodies, industries and other stakeholders for conservation, and the nodal ministry is Ministry of Jal Shakti, and this was actually been a very successful scheme. Okay, let's move forward and see the features. First of all, it emphasizes on India's traditional consciousness. What has India always done? We actually, what to say, it is a negative and a positive thing, but then what do? We always glorify, right? So India always has treated any kind of resource, that is natural resource, be it forest, that's where we have the sacred groves, right? Where trees and forests are considered as God by the local communities, right? So this is what India always treats water as a form of God and the rivers as goddesses. And this adopts the whole society and the whole of government approach. Okay, everybody should actually come together in order to preserve water. Next one, it treats water conservation not just as policy but as a social commitment, and it also aligns with the ongoing Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which means catch the rain. That is why it is establishing the rainwater harvesting methods. Okay, next one, let's move forward. And now it is very important for us to know, this is one such initiative that has been recently launched. But what are the other initiatives which are actually towards the rainwater harvesting? Okay, and also what are the initiatives where there is community participation in conserving water? You need to know. One can be your Jal Jeevan mission. Okay, then it can be the Krishi Sichai Yojana, and then you have the Atal Bhujal Yojana. So under Krishi Sichai only we have per crop, more per drop more crop, and also we have the watershed development, that is where we focus on these management and all. And then we have the Har Khet Ko Pani, that is every crop must actually receive water, and all the irrigation practices are also included over here. So let's quickly see what is the Jal Jeevan mission. This is nothing but a decentralized, okay, not centralized, a decentralized, demand driven and community managed program. Okay, and this actually aims at ensuring the maintenance of village water infrastructure. So maintain the infrastructure for your conservation of water. The next one, Krishi Sichai Yojana, it has Har Khet Ko Pani. Khet means crop, right? So this focuses on creating new water sources through micro irrigation. So wherever there are crops, provide micro irrigation so that water is conserved and it is not wasted. Okay, how much of water was wasted during Green Revolution? We will discuss that also. Next is watershed development. This actually involves constructing, the reservoirs or the ponds as well as rainwater harvesting structures like dams, etc. Okay. Next one, per drop more crop, that is precision irrigation. Very important. Okay, precision irrigation, one type is your drip irrigation, where you drip the water only at the place where it is actually required for the crop. You can also go for sprinkler irrigation, okay, in order to improve the efficiency of usage of water in agriculture. Finally, the Atal Bhujal Yojana. This is nothing but the sustainable management of the groundwater resources. For by how? By all these are community participation is also involved over here. Okay, so these are all very important government initiatives which actually talks about the community participation, and also this becomes very important. Okay, so what is this table? It talks about what are all the traditional water storage systems that India has actually followed, which involves community participation in water conservation. Let me zoom it little bit for you guys. So let's see the traditional water storage systems, okay, in different states. So it was called as the Eri or the Urani in the state of Tamil Nadu. Okay, in Rajasthan it was called as Jar, or it was called as Par or the Johad. Okay, in Nagaland it is called as the Zabo. And similarly, in Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, as well as Odisha, it was called as the Katas as well as the Bhandas. Okay, in Himachal Pradesh, it's called as the Khatri. All these things are there. Next, if you see the community participation, one is, 1 minute, let me see. Yeah, one is Mission Kakatya in the state of Telangana, which focuses on restoring the minor irrigation sources by what? By what? Reclaiming the water tanks. Next one, Jal Hi Jeevan Hai. Okay, so this is in Haryana. So this actually promotes the diversification of crops. That is, instead of focusing on monoculture, where only one particular crop, or what you say, the MSP intensive crop is actually grown, instead of that, focus on crop diversification and also focus on low incentive crop varieties like maize as well as arhar. Okay. Next one is Jal Jeevan Haryali. So this is in Bihar. So this basically aims at identifying, restoring as well as renovating the water storage structures. Next one is the one in Andhra Pradesh where there is community participation, that is Neeru Chetu. This focuses on revitalizing and rejuvenating the natural water resources. Okay. And the next one is local Jal. I hope you can see this here. So local Jal Samhitis. Okay. This is also a part of Jal Jeevan Mission, and this ensures active involvement of at least 50% of the women in conservation of water. So now this table is actually done. Okay, now let us actually move on to see what is the next slide. Next one is soil pollution. So look at the plight of soil pollution in our country. So this is actually a landfill where all these big lorries actually come to your homes in the morning and collect, right? So they go and dump all the waste irrespective of whether they are degradable or non-biodegradable. They go and dump in such a landfill. Okay, so they are sometimes burnt, and that releases in what? The obnoxious gases. Sometimes it can be methane, it can be nitrous oxide, etc. Okay, carbon dioxide as well. And sometimes what happens, it actually, because of rain or little bit of precipitation or any kind of water, what happens, it actually percolates underground. Okay, it percolates underground, mixes with the groundwater, and the surrounding vicinity, specifically the surrounding city or the village, gets highly contaminated with the pollutants like the arsenic, mercury, nitrous oxide, nitrogen, methane, etc. Okay, so this is what is the plight. So I remember that when I was in my final year, I had actually I have done a project with respect to how we can use geotextiles in order to prevent this percolation of impure water, in order to save the pollution of groundwater. Okay, but still, what to say? Let us see, but still it has been almost 10 years, but still this particular situation actually prevails in our country. Okay, let's move forward. So this is soil pollution. So in this soil pollution, we will be discussing about different topics. Let's see what are the topics. Okay, so let us actually start with the global status of salt affected soils. Okay, so salt affected soils are what? These are the soils which are terribly affected by different types of salts. So when there is more absorption of the sodium salts, the soil actually is called as the sodic soil. Okay, and then why it happens, there are other soluble salts also which are actually present over here, that adversely affects the characteristic of the soil, be it the fertility of the soil, and thereby when the fertility of the soil is gone, what happens, the entire biomass which is actually below, that is nothing but the root as well as the trunk, everything is actually affected. Because of that, what happens, the microbial activity underneath is affected, and overall what happens, the entire ecosystem or the plant productivity is actually affected. Okay, so this is called as the salt affected soils. So recently the FAO has released its first report on soil salinity. So amount of salts that are actually present in the soil is called as salinity. Very simple, isn't it? Now let's move forward and understand what do you mean by the salt affected soils. Okay, so there are high concentrations of soluble salts, okay, then exchangeable sodium, or in case both, which actually affects the fertility of the soil. It affects the plant growth and the productivity of the crop, and this is classified primarily into saline soils, the sodic soils, and the saline sodic soils. Okay, nothing, this is not very important, but based on the chemical composition or the characteristics and different physical properties, it is classified as the saline soils, the sodic as well as the saline sodic soils. Okay, now this is how it actually looks. Now let's move forward and see what are the factors that are contributing to salinization and sodification. Of course, anywhere we have the first anthropogenic factor, right? So, what are the anthropogenic factors? Anything and everything. First one starts with agriculture. Next one is deforestation. Next is industrial effluence. Okay, so this is what it is. In agriculture, if you see, there are certain unsustainable or inefficient agricultural practices. Okay, for example, it can be over usage of fertilizers. It can be irrigation with what? Poor quality, and also over exploitation of the aquifers also releases. Okay, so we saw, right, already naturally arsenic is actually being released from the aquifers, and if there is inefficient agriculture, then what? You're triggering it further. Okay, and also if there is inefficient the drainage system, that also releases in the salinization of the soil. Second one is the deforestation. When you are removing the deep rooted crop, when you are uprooting the trees or the vegetation, that will lead to the dry land salination. Next one is other activities, which is nothing but when there is excessive pumping of water, specifically in the coastal as well as the inland areas, that also results in the solidification or increase in the salt content of the soil. The natural factors, of course, the first one is the climate change, because when the area automatically becomes arid or semi arid, what happens? There will be freshwater scarcity, and because of that there is salt deposition all over. Okay, so this is why it is. And the next one is the thawing of the permafrost. I told you, right, permafrost is the top layer of the soil that actually remains frozen for at least 2 years. When this frozen permafrost actually melts, that process is called what? It's called thawing. So this permafrost actually accumulates a lot of carbon. That is why it is one of the best sources of carbon, which can sequester a lot of carbon as well as the other gases, including methane. But when that freezes, it releases a lot of what? Salts into the soil. So this is what are the natural factors. Let's see what are the key findings of this particular FAO report. The global perspective is that approximately around 1.5 billion hectares of the global land area, which is nothing but 10%. Okay, so they have been affected by this particular salinization. Do you understand? So this can also, this has actually, can increase by 24 to 32 percentage is what they say. And the most affected countries are what? Australia as well as Oman. Okay, in terms of area and in terms of percentage. If you see India's specific data, the extent to which the salinization has actually taken place is 2.1% of India's total geographic area is salt affected, and most affected by area what is the state of Gujarat, followed by Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, West Bengal as well as Rajasthan. And if you see the irrigated agricultural land, approximately 20%, or to be very precise 17% is affected because of the use of brackish water for irrigation. So because of brackish water also, what happens? The salt deposition is actually more. This is actually the picture of the salt affected soil. Okay, so this, if you see, this is actually the active soil. So the active soil will sustain a lot of things. Okay, it will sustain your productivity. Okay, it will sustain your diversity, and the environmental services that the soil produces will be more. So what happens is that there will be good and stable aggregates. There will be enough amount of water. So the available water is actually more. There will be nutrient content, and also there will be high content of organic carbon which is actually required. There is more biodiversity in this particular soil. Okay, and then there are no contaminants which are present. That is why it is called as a healthy soil and results in higher or good vegetation and higher productivity. As you can say, they can bear fruits, flowers, vegetables, etc. There is more productivity of the crop. Okay, so this is what is given by FAO. Okay, then if you move towards saline soils, okay, where there is actually the seepage of salts, whether it is your sodium salts, the chlorine, or you can see the carbonate, that is HCO3, etc., or you can actually see magnesium and other compounds over here. Then what happens is that as you move, irrigate it further, there is actually seepage of these salts. So they have excessive levels of, so these have, 1 minute. So these have excessive levels of soluble salts, excessive soluble salts, and this can inhibit the growth of the plant, and there will be less biodiversity, there will be nutrient imbalance in this kind of soil, and the water which is actually available will also be very, very less. So this is actually your saline soil as contrasting with the healthy soil. The next one is the sodic soil. Okay, so here what happens, what are the sodic soils? Here it is high amount of what? Absorbed sodium. Extremely high amount of absorbed sodium is actually there. So there is degradation of the entire structure of the soil. So degradation of the entire structure of the soil, that leads to massive, that gives massive impact in the subsoil. Then there will be less biodiversity over here, and finally there will be nutrient imbalance. Okay, so these are all the things that will actually happen in the sodic soils. Okay, so these are the different types of soils, and this is the salt affected soils if you actually see, and that in turn affects the what? The productivity of the vegetation. Okay, now moving forward, let us see what are the sustainable management practices. We will see both the mitigation efforts as well as the adaptation efforts. Okay, so if you see the mitigation efforts, first is mulching. What do you mean by mulching? Mulching is nothing but, if there is the soil, you actually cover it with materials, okay, the organic materials, etc., which can actually keep the moisture intact. So this is called as mulching. This can be done in order to minimize evaporation and to retain the soil moisture. You can also use interlayers of loose materials so that it actually enhances the infiltration of water, and it also prevents the accumulation of salts on the soil, and also improve crop rotation. That is, grow more salt resistant crops, okay, preferably the halophytes. So this will actually increase the health of the soil as well as the productivity. And then direct leaching of salts. So you have to use the irrigation methods in order to dissolve these salts and send them, flush out the soluble salts from the root zone. Okay, so direct leaching of salts is actually important. The next one, the adaptation efforts. So what are the adaptation efforts? First is breeding and cultivating salt tolerant plants. I told you the halophytes, these are salt loving plants. The next one you can do is bioremediation. What is bioremediation? You are making use of the microorganisms like the bacteria, the fungi, the plants or the animals in order to remove or neutralize the salts which are actually present in the soil. Next one, phytoremediation, that is using specific kinds of plants, okay, that can actually remove the salts and the contaminants from the soil, and this will actually improve the health of the soil as well as productivity. Next one, chemical amelioration. Amelioration is nothing but the prevention methods, okay. So you can always apply the chemicals like gypsum. You can apply what gypsum is, what calcium sulfate. You can apply that in order to displace the sodium ions and improve the health of the soil. And finally use the organic compounds, okay. So use organic materials like manure, compost, etc., in order to enhance the structure of the soil, and also the microbial activity will further increase, thereby it will result in the productivity of the vegetation. Okay, the next one, amendments for sodic soils based on pH. Okay, so what do you mean by pH? pH is nothing but the potential of hydrogen. Okay, so this is what stands for pH. Do you understand? Potential of hydrogen, and when this pH level, that is nothing but it is used as a measure to actually find out if a particular soil is what, alkaline, or if it is acidic. When the pH is equal to 7, this means the soil is neutral, which is suitable or ideal for the growth of vegetation. In case if the pH is less than 7, then this means it is acidic. And when the pH and this is actually found in the northeastern as well as the rainy areas, okay, in West Bengal, then Kerala, Odisha, Jharkhand, you can find this. Next, if the pH is greater than 7, these soils are called as what? Alkaline soils. Do you understand? So this is what it is. So in case of soils with pH below 7 where it is going to be highly acidic, then you have to apply lime, that is calcium carbonate. So this can reduce the acidity as well as the sodicity, improving the conditions of the plant, of the soil for the plant. The next one, if the pH is between 5 to 6.5, then a combination of lime and gypsum can actually be applied. This is just for your understanding, not very important for prelims, but then important, okay. Next, let's move to the next topic. Similar topic, acidification of the soil. I told you about the pH, right? When the pH is less than 7, then it is called as acidic, okay. So when the acidity of the soil actually increases by the release of more H plus ions, then that results in what? Poor fertility of the soil. So according to a recent study, acidification may actually strip India's soil of 3.3, that is when there is excessive acidification, the natural storage capacity of the soil to hold the carbon can actually decrease. So that is why it is going to send away, or it is ripping apart 3.3 billion tons of essential carbon, okay. So this is going to affect the crop growth as well as the sequestration also. This is what is the soil acidification. Let's quickly see. What do you mean by soil acidification? Nothing but if you have the soluble inorganic as well as the organic acids which are actually getting soluble or dissolved in the soil at a faster rate, then it can be neutralized, then it is called as soil acidification. So when that happens, there is actually production of free H plus or the hydrogen ions in the soil, and over 30% of the cultivable land in India, if you say, they actually carry acidic soil, and this is impacting the vegetation growth at large, okay. So this is what is soil acidification. Now moving forward, this is again a picture that actually shows the soil acidification. So when there is acidification of the soil, okay, when there is acidification or dissolved salts in the soil, that is going to alter the root morphology, okay. So the root, if it is actually, you know, different types of root, right, the tap root as well as the fibrous roots. In case if it is a fibrous root, let's actually see, this root system is going to get coarser. Coarser means it's actually going to become thicker, and the potential of the root to absorb water and move it upwards is actually going to be reduced. Do you understand? So coarser root system, and the root biomass is actually going to increase. That is, it's going to become more and more thick, okay. And then the amount of carbon now it is actually going to store. What is going to happen? It can vary, and that is actually going to increase the decrease the fertility of the soil, okay. So soil carbon stock will actually vary. Then this can also result in microbial biomass, a change in the microbial biomass. Because of changes in the microbial biomass, the decomposition of the root of the plant, what happens, it becomes very slow, and as a result of which the soil nutrient cycle also changes. So overall it actually affects the conducive conditions for a plant to grow. So what happens? There is constraints in the productivity of the plant. So what happens? The grassland community actually emerges. That is where you say the graminoids will replace the forbs. Graminoids are nothing but these are grasses. Replace the forbs means these are the other kinds of vegetation, okay. So this is what is going to happen because of your soil acidification, okay. Now let's move forward and see what are all the causes. See, we should all go through all these things very quick because these are common sense as well, right? So we know this already. So that is why we have to go through all this quickly. So causes of soil acidification, first is heavy rainfall of the parent, heavy rainfall and parent material, okay. So when there is heavy rainfall, what happens? There is going to be leaching that is actually going to happen, okay, from the surface of the soil, okay. So this results in the development of acidic soils. Next, plant roots. Okay, there is actually, when there is respiration, the plants release more of carbon dioxide into the soil. This actually results in the formation of carbonic acids and subsequent acidification of the soil. Next one, acid producing fertilizers are actually used specifically when it contains the ammonium as well as the phosphates, then that is going to increase the acidity of the soil, right? Now moving forward, decomposition of the organic residues. Okay, so when the organic residues like the plants and agriculture residues, they actually decompose, they release a lot of organic acids. Okay, this further contributes to acidification. And finally, acid rain. Okay, when there is emission of sulfur and nitrogen oxides, and when this sulfur as well as nitrogen oxides react with that of water, then what happens? It causes H2SO4, that is sulfuric acid, that comes in the form of acid rain. And when it pours down as acid, then what happens? There is going to be even more soil acidification. So this is what they are saying. Okay. Next one, let's move forward and see what is the impact on the crop production and what are the methods that we can actually follow. This is also easy. Impact is aluminium toxicity. Okay, so the acid soils are often associated with aluminium toxicity. This actually inhibits, that is, it affects the plant growth. It actually inhibits the capacity of the plant in uptaking the nutrients. Okay, so all that is affected. Next one, the nutrient availability. Okay, because the availability of nutrient in the soil, that is also being affected by this particular acidification. The next one, microbial activity. This we already saw in the previous diagram, right? Then what are the strategies that can be taken up in order to curb this? Is liming. I told you, application of lime, that is the calcium carbonate, or application of the gypsum, that can be useful. Okay, so calcium oxide, agricultural lime, etc. Next one is aluminium tolerant varieties. Okay, so cultivating the crops which are tolerant to this aluminium toxicity can also help. And finally, the application of gypsum. Okay, so these are all the methods in order to curb the acidification. Now let us actually take a 1-minute break, and if you have any questions, please do post before we move to other kinds of pollution. Okay, so other kinds of pollution is a big topic, so we'll have to finish that as well. Okay, let me have some water and continue with our session. Okay, so under other types of pollution, we will see how much we can finish. We have the light pollution, and then we have the global nitrous oxide what to say budget of 2024. We have the nitrogen pollution, we have the methane pollution. Okay, so let's see how much we can finish it. Okay, any doubts so far that you guys have with respect to the topics that we've discussed? Okay, so far nothing. So okay, now let us actually let us actually start with the next kind of pollution, that is light pollution. Okay, so see how much of light is there and how much it actually obstructs our vision from viewing the natural sky. So this is the amount of pollution which is specifically observed in the metro areas, the developed countries, etc. Okay, so this is what it is. Let's move forward and see the light pollution. So They have even, a recent study has actually said when a person is exposed to excessive light pollution, that can actually, what to say, increase your what to say, potential of being exposed to the Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so it's a very very dangerous disease. Okay, where you forget everything, your cognitive functions are gone, your memory is down the lane, so memory goes away. So it's saying that it can also, excessive light pollution can increase the risk of a person having this Alzheimer's disease. Okay, let us actually see what the light pollution is. It's a very interesting topic. Okay, so what do you mean by light pollution? When there is excessive or misdirected artificial light. Okay, so excessive or misdirected artificial light that negatively impacts the environment. The environment means human beings are also there. So human health, as well as this actually decreases our capacity to observe the night sky. So it is a very rare thing now. These days we actually look at the sky and we can't spot any of the stars, right? So that is because of light pollution, because there is excessive as well as misdirected artificial lighting. Okay, so this arises when these artificial lights are used improperly as well as inefficiently. So this actually results in excessive illumination. It's too bright, right? It's too bright of the nighttime environment. Okay, so this actually takes away the illumination of the nighttime environment itself. Okay, so this is because of what? Rapid urbanization, the industrialization. We have shifts also, we have night shifts these days coming up. So there are excessive misdirection of these artificial lights. So this is what is called as light pollution. So there are different types of light pollution. First one is glare, right? When you're actually going by your vehicle, you can see sometimes it will be very difficult for you to observe even the vehicle that comes in the opposite direction, because there are a lot of bright street lights. Okay, so these are nothing but uncomfortable bright as well as what to say, that very sensitive light that interferes with your vision. And this is because of this particular light is not shielded at all. Okay, but in case if you see the light and where a tree is planted, so that time your vision will be very clear. So these are unshielded lighting which actually causes discomforts to your eye. So that is called as glare. Next one is sky glow. So there is a halo of light that actually appears in the sky. So that is called as the what? Sky glow. And this is also because of unshielded light. Okay, can you see the halo of light that is actually created over here? This is light pollution. The next one is light trespass. Okay, so it is an unwanted light that actually goes from one place to another property. So that is called as this trespass. That is unwanted light that spills over from one property to another. For example, the light shining from one window into your house, okay, into your window. This is called as light trespass. Next one is called light clutter. Okay, this is very confusing. Okay, if you see the busy streets of New York or some of the streets of Asakusa or Tokyo in Japan, you can see the lights are very confusing. You don't even know from where it is coming from. So this is excessive, confusing as well as redundant clutter. See, from randomly it comes from anywhere. So this is actually called as the light clutter. And the next one is over illumination. Too much of light. If you see in the stadiums, okay, the indoor and the outdoor stadiums specifically, now you know because you have your IPL going on. So the using of too much of light and leaving the lights on overnight in empty buildings. So that is also over illumination. So these are the different types of light pollution. So see here, what is the light best where you can see your stars? Gone are those days when we used to sleep on our terrace and watch the stars, right? So light polluted sky, this is unacceptable and this is too much. Okay, this is unshielded. Next one, very bad, because it is only shielded by this particular lid. Then if you see bad, this is still okay. And then better, which is fully shielded light, which actually gives light only to this particular area where it is required. And the best is this particular, that is turn off your light so that you can at least have a look at the sky at night. So this is what is your light polluted sky versus your visible night sky. Okay, so this is the impact of light pollution. Let's see few data on light pollution. So recently there was this World Atlas on night sky brightness. Can you see this? Yeah. So there was this report on night sky brightness, okay. So that actually says over 80% of the population in the world, they reside under high polluted skies. So this actually indicates indicates that artificial lighting obscures the visibility of the sky, and 1/3 of the population is unable to see the Milky Way, okay. That's why if you go to hill stations and specifically towards the north, you can visibly see the Milky Way galaxy, okay. So additionally, 23% of the world's land surfaces, which are between 75° north and 60° south, there 88% of Europe and almost half of the United States experience the nights which are affected by this particular light pollution. And also recent studies had actually said that it has severe impact on human health and environment, okay. So this is also a report that was published by 2019, which said that brightness in Indian night skies is actually too much, and it has risen by over 20%, okay, when compared to that of the past decade, okay. So this is what is the observation, and it also indicated that 70% of India's population, they also live in the light polluted atmosphere only, specifically coming from the metro cities of what? Mumbai as well as Delhi and Kolkata. So this is what it is. So let us move to the next one. What are the initiatives with respect to light pollution? Okay. So first one is International Dark Sky Association. This is a non-profit organization, and they are actually trying to protect the environment from this particular, what to say, the light pollution. That is, they are making it sustainable for the current population as well as for the future generation, okay, by being by what? Advocating responsible outdoor lighting. Next one, the UNESCO Starlight Initiative. This is also an international effort, okay. Next one, the Globe at Night program, again an international citizen science campaign. This is actually raising the public awareness about the ill effects of the light pollution, okay. This is one more. Now moving forward, the next one, International Year of Light and Light Based Technologies, very important. This was adopted in 2015. So you would have had a question on light pollution somehow directly or the other. So this particular year of light and light based technologies, it was proclaimed by the United Nations, okay, in order to raise awareness about the impact of what? The light pollution. Then the Lights Out program. These are city-led initiatives. These are encouraging the buildings to turn off the unnecessary lights, okay, during the process of during the season where there is going to be bird migration, and then so that you can actually reduce the disorientation of these birds as well as avoid their collision. So these are the initiatives with respect to the light pollution. Next one, global nitrous oxide budget, okay. So let us see what is this nitrous oxide budget. So recently in 2024, there has been a report on this global nitrous oxide, okay. So this was released by the Global Carbon Project. Global Carbon Project. This is not important, but then you need to know what is the impact of nitrous oxide. So what is the pollution that is caused by nitrous oxide, okay. So let us move forward and understand what do you mean by nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is also called as the laughing gas, okay. So it is a colorless, it's a non-inflammable gas. It has a slightly sweet odor. This is all very normal things, but you need to know it is a very harmful greenhouse gas because it is 273 times more potent when compared to that of carbon dioxide over a period of 100 years. And also, if you see the atmospheric persistence, once it is emitted and once it goes into the atmosphere, this can stay for around 117 years. So it is very dangerous, and this actually contributes significantly to the global warming. Do you understand? And following the nitrous oxide only, you have even carbon dioxide and methane. So these are second and third. First is nitrous oxide, okay. So now moving forward, let us actually see what are the key findings of the report. So there have been increased anthropogenic emission of nitrous oxide. Okay, so there has been an increase of 40% when compared to that of the 1980 levels, when you compare with that of 2022, and majorly 36% have been contributed by whom? The anthropogenic sources only, and where you have significant agricultural contribution also. Obviously, when you are using fertilizers, okay, so you are also using the animal manure, which are actually rich in this nitrogen. So what happens? It results in 74% of the total nitrous oxide emissions. Moving forward, there are also atmospheric concentrations. Okay, so the concentration of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere has actually crossed around 336 parts per billion in 2022. This is 25% above the pre-industrial levels. Okay, so this is also one of the major causes because of what? The anthropogenic emissions. The next one, soil emissions are also responsible for this. Okay, soils, when they emit, they also result in changing the climate feedback. And if you see the countries which are the highest, or the top 5 countries which are highest nitrous oxide emitters, first comes China, 16.7. They are not only first in terms of development, they are also first in terms of emission. This is why people, or what you say, climate change conferences like, or you say conventions like the UNFCCC, they bring out something called as common but differentiated responsibility, which ideally means what? When you pollute more for your development, then you have to pay more, right, for your development. Because you have polluted because of development, how you can actually transfer that to very middle income countries, right? So this is what it is. So China 67%, India 10.9%, United States 5.7, and so on. The fifth one is Russia, 4.6% of nitrous oxide. Okay, now moving forward, let us see the natural sources. I will quickly run you through. Of course, the soil and fresh water and atmosphere. There are the microbial processes that happen in the soil and the water. Okay, so they naturally produce this nitrous oxide. Okay, through the processes of nitrification and denitrification. Next one, the oceans. Okay, so here also, if you see the marine microbial activity, these also generate nitrous oxide. So this is a part of the nitrogen cycle. So there is natural production of nitrous oxide already. If you see anthropogenic, we just saw agriculture emissions are actually there, as well as the waste. When you are burning the biomass, there is emission of this particular nitrous oxide. Then fossil fuel and industry. So industrial processes, which actually includes the production. When there is production of nitric acid, automatically there is actually production of nitrous oxide, that also emit. Next, nitrogen deposition, fresh water and coastal. Okay, so there is actually what? The deposition of reactive nitrogen compounds from the atmosphere into the water bodies. Next one, climate and land use change feedback. So again, the same things only, which you know, it's easier for you to understand because we discussed all this in detail. Okay, next one is methane pollution. So with this topic, I think we will actually stop our discussion today, because I had planned for 13 topics, but now I think we are just kind of running out of time. So methane pollution, can anybody just tell me, is it fine if we take 3 more topics, or is it fine for the day? Okay, so methane pollution. Okay, methane, CH4. So recently, the IEA, that is the International Energy Agency's Global Methane Tracker, has recently noted that in 2023, the methane emissions from the fossil fuels reached around 120 million tons. Okay, so this is actually what? It has crossed the record level so far. Okay, so this is what is the recent observations that have been made with respect to methane. What is important for us is to understand about methane. So what is methane? It is a colorless, odorless, as well as a highly flammable gas. Very, very important. Whereas nitrous oxide, inflammable, not flammable. Okay, so methane is a flammable gas. And then if you see, it is the second largest contributor to global warming. Okay, after carbon dioxide, which is actually responsible for 30% of the global heating. So since the industrial revolution, methane has actually been a significant contributor of the global warming. Next one, The global warming potential what is the global warming potential of methane according to the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, is that in a period of 20 years, methane is 80 times potent than that of carbon dioxide. So we always say that carbon dioxide emissions, we have to protect it, we have to do CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, carbon credits, carbon mechanism, carbon market. What are we going to do with respect to nitrous oxide as well as methane? Has anybody thought about it? We'll have to, reorient our policies, or there has to be a paradigm shift in order to control these kind of the greenhouse gas emissions, because these are so many times obnoxious when compared to that of carbon dioxide. We saw nitrous oxide, which was 273 times more potential. Okay, it has more potential than that of carbon dioxide. So here, despite having this one, that is the global warming potential, methane has a shorter atmospheric lifetime. That is, it won't stay in the atmosphere for 117 years and all. Okay, just like nitrous oxide. So the ground level ozone, we actually spoke about the ground level ozone. Methane also contributes to the formation of ground level ozone. We usually think ozone is present only in the stratosphere, and it actually protects the life on earth from the ultraviolet radiation of the sun. But when what happens, it is also present in the troposphere at a height of 10 kilometers from the ground, and that is called as ground level methane, and that is also more powerful greenhouse gas when compared to that of carbon dioxide. It does not have a particular source of emission. It is when different volatile organic compounds actually react with sun. Okay, the solar radiation or sunlight. Okay, so this is when the ground level ozone is actually produced. Okay, so this is the ground level ozone, that methane is also a contributor for formation. Next, methane emissions are there. According to the IEA, which has recently come up with this report, the largest contributor of methane emission, okay, are the anthropogenic emissions, especially the agriculture as well as the energy sector. So this is what they have said, and India's contribution in methane emissions is around 8.3%. Okay, again important. Now, let's move forward in seeing what are all the major sources of methane emissions. If you can't see this, let me zoom this picture for you guys. The natural sources. We know, right? What are the natural sources of methane? So, first one are wetlands. So, wetlands. So, what are these wetlands? This actually includes the the swamps, and then you have the mangroves, etc. Right? These marshes, and then the rice paddies. All these things are the largest sources of methane emission. That is why they say agriculture contributes the most to methane emission. Okay, so that is one of the reason, right, that India did not sign the global methane pledge, where countries actually sought to reduce the greenhouse gas emission of methane by 30% by 2030. India did not, because we are an economy which run on agriculture as well as livestock rearing. Okay, so this is what it is. Next one, termites. Do you know, as a part of digestion process, these termites actually produce methane? So that is also one of the contributor, and surprisingly it contributes 11% of the global methane emissions. Did you even expect that? No. Next one, oceans and freshwater bodies. So we saw, right, microorganisms in the oceans as well as freshwater. When there is a condition of lesser or deficit of oxygen, that is the anaerobic conditions, what happens? 2% of the global emissions actually come out from in the form of methane by what? The freshwater bodies, by the microorganisms. Next one, the geological sources. What are the geological sources? The natural sources like volcanoes, we have the aquifers, as well as the geothermal vents. These actually release the emission, and this contributes to around 4% of the global emissions. So these are the natural sources, where the wetlands, that is the swamps, mangroves, etc., or it can also be the termites as a part of their digestion process. Next one, it is because of the microorganisms which are present in the marine ecosystem. And finally, the geological sources like the volcanoes as well as the vents, the geothermal vents, etc., that can release the emissions. Okay. Moving forward, if you see the anthropogenic sources, okay, so first one is agriculture. So here you have the livestock that significantly releases the emissions. Through what? the process of fermentation. So this results in 27% of the emissions. Okay, and also the rice cultivation, we already saw that, right? The paddy, and in the anaerobic conditions, what happens? The decomposition of the organic matter produces methane. Next one, fossil fuel production. Definitely, you know, during the production of fossil fuels, the transportation, distribution, etc., there is methane which is actually released, which releases around 20, which accounts for around 23% of the global emissions. The next one, landfills and waste management. Okay, of course, you know, when the how is methane actually produced in the landfills? There is organic waste which are present there. When there is decomposition of the organic waste over there, as well as the wastewater treatment, during the process methane is actually released. And finally, during the burning of biomass. So that is why they actually say do not do the stubble burning. Okay, so this actually brings about a menace of to the surrounding NCR region. Then we discussed about this air quality index, etc., etc., right? So these are the major sources of methane emissions. Okay, moving forward, let's wind up this session by discussing the different initiatives. It's already time. So the first initiative, the Global Methane Pledge, we know that it actually came as a result of COP26 in order to reduce 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the 2020 levels by 2030. We did not sign it. Then we have the Global Methane Initiative. This is also an international public-private partnership that makes the methane emissions less by reducing the barriers. Next one, the methane sat. This is actually used in order to tracking the methane emissions. Recently we studied about Mars also, right? Methane assessment and response system. So this is also there in order to support the global efforts in order to reduce methane. Next one, oil and gas decarbonization charter. So this actually accelerates the emission reduction. So it deals with the oil as well as gas industries globally. Next one is World Bank's Global Gas Flaring Reduction Partnership. Again, it actually asks the countries who are part of it in order to end the routine gas flaring as well as reduce the emissions of methane. Initiatives taken by India. First one is methane reduction in agriculture, where we have the National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture. So this basically talks about the climate resilient agricultural practices, which results in the reduction of the methane emissions, specifically in the rice or the paddy cultivation. Okay. Next one, capacity building through Krishi Vigyan Kendras, because they actually educate the farmers on what is the potential impact of the methane emission on the environment. Okay, and what is the importance of climate resilient practices is actually being told to them. Next one, methane reduction in livestock sector. That is through National Livestock Mission. So here the strategies like improvement of the breed, and then there has to be balanced rationing are actually employed in order to reduce methane. And finally, this encourages the production of green fodder. Even the fodder that you actually feed to the livestock have to be methane free, and promote the techniques like silage making and the calf cutting to reduce the methane emissions. This I will discuss with you tomorrow in detail. Okay, so this I'll actually take up tomorrow. So along with this, I think we have two more topics that are actually left with respect to that of the other types of pollution. So one, we have to deal with nitrogen pollution. Okay, so what is the impact of nitrogen pollution? The methemoglobinemia that I actually told you in the beginning of the session, where it actually reduces the capacity of the hemoglobin to carry oxygen, and then that in infants is called as the blue baby syndrome, right? So that we have to discuss. And then we have to discuss about mercury pollution, mercury Hg, that is called as hydrogarum, that is water silver. So we'll discuss about mercury also. And I think the next topic will be with respect to mercury, we'll talk about the Minamata Convention also. And then one more important topic is your persistent organic pollutants, that is the POPs, right? So persistent organic pollutants, and there we'll talk about the Stockholm Convention and everything that is very, very important for our discussion. So Stockholm Convention is a part of what? Similarly, the Cartagena Protocol, the Nagoya Protocol that we actually discussed yesterday on conventional biological diversity. All this we will be discussing tomorrow. And remind me, these initiatives with respect to methane emissions, we will again take up because there were certain technical terms that I did not explain for you today because we are running out of time. Okay. So we've actually come to the end of our live discussion. Please do follow this course diligently so that you can have an upper hand or a higher chances of clearing the preliminary examination. Okay, so we'll meet you tomorrow again with another live session on environment and ecology series. Please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.